Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Holy moly. It's the Voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 230. We are talking about executing your growth strategy. Now, there are a lot of ways that this conversation can go. So all I'm going to do is shape it like I shape every conversation and say you're in the right place. You're in the right place for conversations that we, as current business leaders today, face the challenges and grapple with the problems that we are thinking about, that we are tackling, that we are in the middle of when it comes to our growth. It could be in regards to technology. It could be in regards to changing customer expectations. It could even be just keeping up with how fast change happens today. And those were only three things. There's a gazillion, ever million. There's probably a great Scooby-Doo word for a number that goes right there. But the thing is, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about what it means to not only reach our short-term goals today, but to have confidence in the goals and the decisions that we're making today so that we're positioning for our longer-term success down the road. With us is Dr. Amanda Barrientez, and she is the founder of NFA, No Around, Mindset, Habits, and Business Coaching. She is driven to help people thrive in their personal and professional life. What makes Amanda unique is how she coaches, from coupling her social sciences training with her real life experiences and overcoming those big challenges that she, you, me, we all face. Also with us is Joe Workman. He is an entrepreneur. He is a business owner. He is a husband and a father of three, sometimes in that order, but lots of times in all of the order at the same time. And he lives in San Francisco. He enjoys an indie life. This concept of running a business, being a family man, and doing both at the same time. What did I say? I've actually just said that about those other things in regards to him. He does them all at the same time. He empowers web designers and small businesses to build their websites with zero code. Now, both of these people have very cool skill sets and very amazing backgrounds. And so if you don't know what zero code is, you're going to have to just reach out to Joe and find out, because it may be useful to you. And if you're interested in, sharing an experience or actually figuring out how do you get your head straight, how do you think about things so you can do stuff that we talk about on this show, you've got to talk to Amanda. And with that, both of you, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, Jess.
Thanks so much. Honored to be here.
Yes.
So we're going to just jump right in. Amanda, I want to know about how you execute. What do you do to ensure that your growth strategy becomes a reality?
I love this question. I want to start with saying that everything I do is aligned with my genius juice, or my highest values orientation. So the reason that I'm able to execute and accomplish so much in a year is because I align it with what I'm highest called to do. It's my intrinsic inspiration. And so one of the things that I do is help people find what their genius juice is. And for me, it's business building is top on my list right now. And so what I do at the beginning of every year is I have a year-long vision that I map out. I'll spend a couple of days thinking, okay, what do I really want to create this year? I create a few umbrella items, and then I implement and execute through having a 90-day plan. So I always have a 90-day strategic plan for only a couple of really specific goals that are going to get me to my year-long vision. And then my key secret that everyone is like, that's what really gets you there, is consistent daily strategic action. So every morning I journal and I write down what my top 3 to 5 highest priority actions are for that day. And I'm always asking myself, what are the highest priority actions I can take today in order to execute on my goals this year? And especially for that 90-day plan. So I found that it's really powerful to change from a year-long goal system to a 90-day planning system, and then make sure I'm implementing the daily steps in my journaling every morning so that I can get aligned very clearly. After I journal and write those down, I meditate for a few minutes on it and imagine it happening and see it exactly as I want it to be happening. And boom, there it goes.
Wow. Okay. So, do you understand why she's here to talk about this? Because we have so much to unpack. We could have just a couple of shows on those things. All right. I want to know from you, Joe,
Mhm.
about your execution. What are you doing to ensure that you're staying on track with your growth strategy?
So, it's kind of same premise, right? It's all about what your purpose is, right? So you have to know what your purpose is in life, and that has to be your driving force, right? So, for me, it's all about my family. So, that's my main purpose. Why am I do? It's important to know why you're doing what you're doing, so that during the hard times, that will propel you through that, right? Now, how do I um keep that on focus? Definitely, you have to have goals, right? So I definitely do. At the beginning of the year, I have a high level overview of what I would like to accomplish that year. And then a key part of that is then breaking that down into quarterly goals. So, we're wrapping up quarter two. I have my goals set for my second quarter. And another way that helps me keep track of my goals is I'm a part of a mastermind group, and we meet once a week. And I actually run the group, mostly because um, I couldn't find a group that I wanted, so I formed my own group. And what's great is we track quarterly goals. Every week we review what those goals are. Is what we accomplished this particular week actually help us, progress on our goals? Are we actually working on what we're supposed to work, right? So then every week we say, what am I going to work on next week at the end of the week? So that we have, what are our goals for next week? And then at that point, once I set my goals for next week, I kind of plan out my week in terms of what I want to do, hopefully on a daily basis. So obviously some things shift around depending on life, but that is definitely a huge thing. So I track my basically going, like Amanda said, we start from the yearly, the big picture, then we go to quarterly, and that's really where I concentrate on with the mastermind in terms of focusing on what those goals are. What can I do every week to basically take one bite out of that elephant at a time so we can accomplish that by the end of the quarter. And at the end of the quarter, you need to reevaluate, what did I do good? What did I do bad? And then set new goals for the next quarter, right? And maybe if you need to reevaluate your yearly goals and say, okay, let's look at that. Is that still where I want to be by the end of the year? Things of that nature, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much how I execute.
Discipline. People, it's discipline. They both talked about it, and I'm just going to name it. And the reason is because while they're really disciplined in this area, I know I can say I have a different kind of discipline in this area, and so I'm working on it. That's one of the reasons we do shows like this. And our process at Red Direction is similar to both of those. And it sounds like for any of you out there that have any discipline at all, you're going to have something similar. And so let's stick with discipline. And I want to start just our roundtable part of the conversation around this concept. How did you get it? How did you get that discipline?
That's a great question. Do you want to go, Joe?
It's being, if I'm not disciplined, then I don't get stuff done. Money doesn't come in, and it's all done on purpose. I can't send my kids to the schools that we want to send them to, and I can't pay the mortgage, and I can't do that stuff, right? So, it's just the fact of life where the rubber meets the road is if I don't do that, then there are big consequences, and I can't have that. Yeah, you have to own your own life. So
right.
That's
yeah.
So true.
Discipline. It's making me really think. I always like to look up the root of words, and I'm trying to avoid getting my phone and going like, what's the root of discipline? I love words and the meaning behind words. And I think about discipline as, it's like thinking of disciple, or what's the root? We got to look it up. The Latin root of discipline.
Here, I was going to say, we got two other people while we're thinking out loud.
Yeah, go for it.
Right.
So to me, I love the root of words, but I'm thinking for me, it's really, again, related to those values. And before I had the methodology to understand the way that my values are driven by my chief aim and my telos and all of the things I want to create in life, I've always had that I think we all have that driving force, but the way that people judge what we do, it looks different because we're all disciplined in our highest values. If you're doing what you love, no one has to remind you to do it. So helping yourself be on the path of your highest values helps you be disciplined because you get up and you spontaneously do it. You're intrinsically inspired instead of extrinsically motivated. No one has to get you to do it. So you're automatically disciplined. You're going to be focused and you're going to have greater attention and drive, and that equals discipline. So to me, it really has to do with operating from your inner compass of what really drives you and keeps you excited to where work feels like play. And then no one has to say to me, like, you really need to do this. I'm just intrinsically motivated to do it every day.
So eloquent.
Did you find it? I found it.
If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. I love it. I feel like my work is vacation. So it's like people will ask, you're going on vacation this, and I'm like, I don't run my life around vacation or retiring, or, I just go, I don't see those things in the same light. I just go, my whole life is play. So I get to have fun doing what I'm doing at all points in time.
100%.
Yeah. I do it with the motivation. I feel like I'm a cross between the two of you, where I'm like, yeah, rubber meets road. Yeah. We got things to do, baby. And of course, I wouldn't do anything else. Even the parts that I consider hard work are so short term. Amanda Norris behind the scenes, she found this for us. Root meaning of discipline comes from discipulus, the Latin word for pupil. So I might have misspelled or mispronounced one of those things, but it's the Latin root or word for pupil. And so I think that's fantastic. So it's always about learning then too, isn't it?
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Now, I do have to say that, I assume kind of from what I know of Jess, she suffers from this too, the squirrel syndrome, right? I'm constantly fighting off the squirrels. It is a battle, right? But just with over time, you just learn to kind of control those a little bit. And, but yeah, fighting the squirrels is a big thing.
Because those squirrels could be the right thing, right?
I don't know that analogy. Hopefully everybody does, right? It's just managing distractions in life.
It is.
For example, my kids, it was yesterday, their first day of summer. They were home in the morning and they started watching this movie, Ready Player One. Not sure if any of you have seen that.
Yes, we've seen Ready Player One.
I totally got sucked into it. And I didn't work. I just sat down with my kids and we watched the movie, which is cool. I live the indie life. I can do that, right? But
that's awesome.
Yeah, that is definitely something that, distractions like that, especially because I work from home all day, you have to learn to manage that stuff, right?
True.
So.
Yeah. And, and here's the cool thing though, squirrel syndrome in the sense of, oh, wow, there might be opportunity here and we've got to go after everything versus the squirrel syndrome of distraction. And then there's and then I would even say, Joe, what I just heard you say was, you know what? I have equal priorities in my life. I want to do good work and contribute, and I want to really have a strong connection to my family. Mm-hmm. And so you didn't work in the morning. It's going to happen sometime. I mean, that's kind of how I look at a lot of that is if I want to take a half of a day off or I'm extra tired one day or something comes up last minute, I'm like, oh yeah, why not? Why not shift this around? Because it may be, well, and especially when it comes to our families, it is a once in a lifetime chance right then. Mm-hmm. And we don't give ourselves enough credit to go, this is a once in a lifetime chance right now for me. We don't know what that walk in the middle of the day would bring, or that cat nap right before the next part of the day or the next set of tasks happen, or getting out and running and doing some serious training. I mean, whatever it is that really refuels what we are, I think adds to our ability to have discipline. Otherwise, it's kind of like a candle and eventually it burns out.
Yep.
I have to highlight it. To me, it's really interesting that you're focusing on discipline in terms of just work discipline, because those other things you're saying is actually a discipline of joy.
That's right.
You're being a student of joy and you're being joy led. So it's not that it's just work you have to have discipline or that you want to have discipline. It's like, oh, let's have discipline in our whole life and just structure ourselves from joy. And the cool thing about being an entrepreneur is that you get to, you can go, hey, I want to go on a run in the middle of the day. Let's do it.
Not really discipline from joy. It's because you could have two different joys. So it's just disciplining which ones you want to work on at any point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean that, I think, yeah, it's interesting. It was noticeable to me. And I think, and I was also thinking about how there's different trajectories or different times in your life developmentally, like even in the era of, because my kids are older, so my kids aren't around during the day. And when they were, my first focus was them. And so my work life would have looked dramatically different than it does now when they're much older and my life isn't oriented around my kids in the same way. Right. So I was thinking about how there's different stages of life create different forms of discipline, and you get to experience different things based on those different kind of eras of your life and what's going on in that time for you.
I love the interplay here. And I'm glad you pointed out and just spoke up, Amanda, about the fact that we are talking about joy. We are talking about whole life, not part of life, because we have a bigger overarching theme. And something that showed up for me as you were talking was just around that. And so let's say, well, I'm going to pause here and start over. That means we have to be really good at it. We have to be learning from what worked and didn't work. And I'm going to go back to part of what Joe was saying at the beginning, that if we're not reviewing what worked and didn't work, we don't know how to plan. And we're going to continue to just shoot things into the dark and hope. And it's going to be more of a shotgun approach instead of laser focused, which impacts our results, which impacts how we get to choose joy, what joy we choose, and which work we do when. And so I want to tie it back to that of, if we switched a little bit into this, well, how do we review? How do we review and actually make sure we're learning, right? If we're going to talk about discipline, the root word being pupil, okay? A pupil is going to learn and have people that they're looking up to and learning from. How do we do that when, regardless of if we're working for ourselves or for others or alone or as part of a team, it's our responsibility to.
Yeah, I love that. I was loving what Joe was saying too about that evaluative self-reflection and awareness of what worked and what didn't before you move on to the next quarter, so you don't carry what didn't work into that upcoming quarter. And if you don't take the time to have that self-reflection and evaluate what worked and what didn't, then you're going to continue to replicate the problems, or you can choose to replicate the successes. So it's part of that pupil state of discipline and being an ongoing student and being responsive to your environment. I was actually, when you said pupil at first, I was visualizing your eye, your pupil eye.
That's what I thought.
But I was thinking it's kind of interesting because it's actually responsive to the environment, right? Yeah. And so it's a similar thing. You're responding to the environment based on that. The outer stimuli is shaping the way that you see the world. And so how are you reflecting on it so that you can be aware and move forward with awesome execution instead of execution that's replicating problems or creating more challenges that you don't want to create.
Yeah, it's kind of like that famous quote from Einstein, which is like, the definition of insanity is trying to solve your problems at the same level of thinking as when they were, started, or something like that. It's not the exact quote, but same thing where it's, if you're not willing to change and evaluate what you've done, you're not going to improve in the future.
Right. And there's no ability to question assumptions. And I know that gets me every time. People don't like to say they have assumptions. And when I know, and I don't like to say I have assumptions either. I like to be confident. And sometimes my confident turns into, of course I know that. And that's just horrible. And when I catch myself in that, it's like, oh, no, I don't know that. But I'm confident I am on the right path to either learning or confirming or whatever I need to do from that. And so that's an interesting process that has happened in the course of my career life. And I don't know if that would have happened if I didn't have a career life. Let me just tell you that. I think that where you're able to do things differently with a whole bunch of different people that don't see our whole selves. We can still be authentic and not share our whole selves, right? And so how do you learn to navigate that world outside versus the world we bring in, and whatever that looks like in where we work, who our family is, who our friends are, the people we choose to spend time with when we have that time. And so I'm always fascinated from things from that perspective of assumptions are always there. We just have to be willing to see them.
Mhm.
So true.
Another topic that you kind of brought up earlier that I thought was interesting was, years ago, people always talked about work-life balance. And I've noticed a trend recently. I've heard it a lot more where, which is the philosophy I've taken for a long time, is that it's not about work-life balance. It's about work-life integration, I think, where it's, you just integrate life and work. It's all the same, right? So the way I take it is like yesterday, yes, I took the morning off and watched a movie with my kids, or maybe it's when my daughter has to go to dance lessons, I take her to dance and spend time with her. And then while she was in dance class, I have my phone and I can work a little bit while I'm waiting for her or watching her dance or whatever, right? So it doesn't need to be rigid where, this is my time for work, this is my time for life, you have to be flexible. You got to learn how to integrate those stuff and when you can work and when you can't work. And, you know, and then I think it's important actually that your kids see that as well, where they see that I'm spending time with them and that but also at the same time, I'm dedicated to my business and building and growth of my business and supporting my family. So it's important that they see that as well.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The work-life balance thing, I always think is so funny and interesting because I like that you switched it to integration, because to me, it's like, it doesn't seem possible to do a 50-50 split. Like, I'm going to work this much and it's more about integration and flow and just allowing yourself, like you're saying, that, you go to the practice with the kids and then you have time to do your work and then you just flow with your day differently than trying to almost force these compartmentalized times that don't always work for people that have kids and own their own businesses.
Yep.
Well, and think about our personal wellness. If we were to think about that, I mean, there are days all I want are greasy, rich foods to eat. Okay. So I'm totally moving out of work for the moment. But the thing is, and then there are other days, all I want is to eat broccoli and kale. And so realistically, what do we learn? We learn we have to fit everything into every 24 hours. And once you subtract work and once you subtract sleep, and what's going to get lost is the sleep. Well, all of those things are important. So I'm hearing that there's more of an arc, right? There's some sort of an arc, that there's this period of time. And by the way, both of you chose 90-day periods of time at the beginning. I thought that was interesting that you both had that. This arc of, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. So as long as we've got enough stuff happening for each of those things, right? I don't eat cheeseburgers every day and I don't eat broccoli every day, because both of those things to the extreme are not good. But what is that arc and how does that look so that we have a little bit more flexibility? And it's a hard shift. It's a hard shift when we're not the business owner. It's a hard shift if we don't have the discipline to actually recognize what needs to get done and do the work so that we can do all of the things that we want to maintain that. It's almost like we each have our own special equation for equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I hear if I were to reflect back what the two of you just said.
I love that.
Yeah, because we all have different circumstances, different business, different requirements, different family, different routines, different. Yeah. So, it's not something where my formula won't work for Amanda and her formula won't work for you, Jess. Right. So,
right.
It's just something that you have to come up with on your own. You definitely listen to others and learn from their experiences and then integrate that to create your own plan.
Yeah.
I love that, because even if you're thinking about like comparing two business coaches side by side, they're going to have a totally different arc based on what kind of coaching they do and where they live. And, there's so many different variables at play at all points in time. So it's tailoring, it's knowing that success leaves clues. So we can all say that discipline is a clue that successful people leave, but the way that you structure the discipline is going to vary between people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are listening to program 230, Execute Your Growth Strategy. Use hashtag VBB Radio to join in our conversation. We will be right back.
You're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
Wowie, this is already super action-packed. And both of these people, right, Joe and Amanda, that are here today, our special guests, are bringing in this experience and this wisdom and really willing to share from the heart about what we have going on when we're talking about executing growth strategy. Because anybody who's out there listening that's responsible for any, sometimes all, of that budget responsibility, that revenue responsibility, everything we're talking about applies to you. Everything we talk about right now is applying to you. And that means to us too, which is why we're having this conversation, because we're going to have times where it's like, what just happened? We just landed a gigantic new client. My child is learning how to drive and is really worried about that test. Maybe my mother needs some help and I have to be available to take her to doctor's appointments. Maybe something's up with my neighbor and I offered to help them too, or my family did. And the list goes on. And sometimes it's really overwhelming. And so I recognize that this execution of growth strategy is so important because it's easy, regardless of how much discipline we have, how much joy we bring, that we can get off track. And so I want to start the second half of the program from something that was in both of the answers that Amanda and Joe shared. And that was they have larger images of and thoughts and plans about what their business is and is doing. And then they've broken it down, both of them, 90 days and quarterly. So they both have these more quarterly 90-day type cycles. And I want to hear from the two of you, how did you find that this 90-day cycle was the right one for you?
So I chose, well, I started with 90 day just because it was a quarter, right? And it just seemed like that was just a nice way to break up a year, 4 quarters, right?
Yeah.
You read enough business books and self-help books where they a lot of those recommend that as well. So you use that as a starting point. And in practice, it really is a decent amount of time. So 3 months, you can get a lot done in 3 months. I just think it is a good way, that gives you 3 chances throughout the year to kind of correct your course, right? Because you have your review your goals for Q1, Q2, and then Q3 you can review, and then all of a sudden you have the end of year goal. I just think it really is a good round number. And I found I've been using that for a couple years now, or about 3 years, and it's really worked well for me.
I just implemented this more recently and started using it with my clients, and it works really well. Part of it, I think there's a few things. One, I want to give an image kind of it. What happens when you're on, let's say you're climbing to the top of a staircase and you can't see the top stairs. As you take each step, you start to have clearer perspective of what's going to be at the top. So when we tend to do year-long goals, you have a lack of clarity and understanding about what's even at hand. So you've got to kind of start the process before you can know exactly where you're going. And especially in business development, when there's so many variables and unknown, it's often we're taking on new projects and things that we've never done before. So I think that when we set those year goals, it almost sets us up for failure and frustration because we can't really see at the beginning of the year what's at the end of the year. And so I like to break it down into that smaller time allotment. And then so it provides clarity. And then I also think that Parkinson's law is really important. So the work expands to fill the time allotted. So if you give yourself a year, people will often put off until the last quarter and then hustle. So instead of doing that, let's hustle for 90 days. Okay, now let's rejuvenate for a week and let's hustle again for 90 days. And then let's reflect and see what worked and what didn't, and let's do it again. And so it's just a very different way of thinking about executing on long-term vision, but with a shorter-term strategy.
So here I am, I'm listening to the two of you, and we may be refining a little bit what we're doing as a team at Red Direction, because for me, I'm like, all right, whatever our priorities are, we're going to choose the actions. And all right, each of these actions has a period of time. So tell me the time it's going to take and what we need to do and what our roles are to make this happen. And then let's put an end date on it. And I can tell you, we may need to shift that. And I don't know if it's because of, and I'll be completely honest, I miss a lot of those deadlines and me being the leader, I'm owning that. Our team misses a lot of those deadlines. And I don't know what the culprit is. That's like one of the things, like when it comes to client deliverables, that's no problem. When it comes to our internal projects, that's the problem. And I say, is it really a problem? We get it all done. It doesn't last forever. Something that is said we're going to take 2 weeks might take 3. Something that's supposed to take 3 months might take 4. So it's not extremely bigger, but there is that scope creep of, well, now we have less time for the next thing, or everything has to move out. And so I find it fascinating, that we're able to do it differently externally than internally. And I recognize that there's a big part of that. That's probably me. And so I'm listening to the two of you and I'm like, maybe consistency in the timing would be enough for me to get what needs to be done differently, instead of trying to have projects managed that are overlapping and not one right after the other, for example. So, that's kind of what's coming up as I was listening to the two of you, because I keep track of quarterly and annual stuff and stuff like that, but I don't really think about what needs to be in quarter 1 and what needs to be in quarter 2. It's like, what do we need to do right now? And what do we have time to do? And what do we have the resources to do? And we prioritize those projects to get forward motion. So it's a very different outcome. It's a little less time driven. So when people think about time.
And, I set my quarterly goals, but if I don't hit something, a date or something like that, I don't beat myself over the head. It's okay. That happens, right? And especially for me, as primarily a developer, I'm notorious for thinking I can do something in a month and it's going to take me 4 months, right? Okay.
That's confidence, my friend. Of course I can.
Rebrand. Okay. Yeah. And I was planning on launching in April. I launched in November. Right. And was that stressful? Yes. Did I get it done? Yes. Am I so happy that it's all done? 100%. Right. So I can't beat myself up over that. It took me an extra 6 months. It took me a lot longer. And, it's just something I need to improve on in terms of, thinking, analyzing a project, determining how long it's going to take, and maybe tacking on an extra 50%. And if I finish early, great. If I don't, oh well. You can't beat yourself up over that though, right? It's just at the end of the quarter, you go, okay, we didn't make that. We're moving that goal from quarter 1 to quarter 2. And that's okay, right? Because you're making forward momentum. You have the progress, right? And one thing I think that these quarterly goals and higher level ideas of what you want to do on a yearly basis, and this is something I'm improving on, is stopping myself from reactively working on something, right? So, proactively planning what am I going to, so I do live streams once a week, okay, on YouTube. And based on that live stream, I have to post on Twitter. I got to create some, marketing images. I got to, all that stuff, right? So instead of doing that Tuesday night, because I'm doing a live stream on Wednesday, let's plan those out 3 weeks in advance. And because now I'm doing that, right? And you're being proactive and you're planning that. And that relieves so much stress. You have no idea, right? Because if something comes up between, let's say, Monday and Tuesday, something dramatic happens. If I already have all that stuff planned and scheduled in, some tool, right? I don't need to worry about it, or delegate it out to somebody else if that's your thing, right? Then you don't need to worry about that. But planning that out and having that plan relieves a lot of stress, so that it kind of opens up your mind for other things rather than just constantly reacting to the daily stresses of things that come on in our business.
Oh my gosh, you should have seen us when we first started the Voice of Bold Business Radio. It was exactly that. It was craziness. What are we going to do? And when are we going to do it? And everything was last minute. And we got to the point where finally we were like, oh, a process. Hey, there's more than just you, Jess. So you can't do it at the last minute because we have 3 more things to do after you, kind of, right? But I don't work by time the way other people work by time. And so thinking about that and recognizing that, it not only reduced a lot of stress internally on our team, Joe, what you're sharing, and it also actually made us way more productive. We actually grew and got better and saw opportunities because there was spaciousness. I love that you shared that.
I love this. I want to add, yes, what I hear both of you saying is planning and strategic action. So for me, it's always about that strategic action and the planning, because, and then like Joe is saying, the momentum will carry you, and you might not get exactly where you thought where you were going to get, but you're moving in the direction, and you're going to get there a lot faster than if you do nothing. And so it's this constant strategic action and planning in a direction. And then just like for me, I'm just going systems. So the more that I can develop systems in my business, and the more that I help my clients develop systems, the faster and more masterfully they all get there, and I get there. So it's like having that schedule down where you go, okay, every week on this day is when I do my videos, and this is when I do my podcasts, and this is when I have clients, and following that system, because I think a lot of people think that systems are confining, but it actually disciplined routines set you free. So you have more flexibility in knowing the structure of the system. And that takes planning and premeditation. Like, you're talking about being proactive versus reactive, Joe. I really love that, because it's that proactive planning that causes you to not have to be reactive.
There's also a saying that says that, we vastly overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. Yeah. Right. So, it's just that forward momentum, just getting stuff done. And eventually 5 years, 10 years from now, you're going to have something humongous. It doesn't matter that if you missed that goal 5 years ago.
This is so awesome, Joe. I recorded my video and podcast this morning. And that was I said, we massively overestimate what we can do in a week or a month, but we underestimate what we can get done in a year. Yeah. 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 That's wild that you just said that.
Weird. I like how this universe works that we are in. That's for so sure. Cool. So what comes up around that then is it is about momentum. So whether we have to plan to create the momentum, whether we act to create the momentum, or whether we think to create the momentum, there has to be something that moves forward. And then somehow there's this thing that appears that's being worked toward. And as long as it's fairly certain what the outcome is going to be, it doesn't matter what goes inside the thing or the order of the thing. It just matters that we know the milestones along the way. It's like, yes, that's closer. I'm starting to see that part more clearly. Yes. And it may be like that. I always go back to the Family Circus cartoon where the kid walks around and does 5 miles worth of stuff before breakfast. Yeah. Busy is good if it's purposefully busy, is what I think. But in general, busy can be bad. And so have you ever found yourselves have you over processed? Have you, created too many processes that actually then became restrictive, or that then you had to be like, all right, this is lost. Not only its luster, but it's starting to be impeding and change has to occur. Have you ever had things like that in your quarterly or annual review type things?
Yeah. And I think this brings up a point I wanted to make earlier, was that sometimes you need to learn to say no, right? Mm-hmm. As well, where you're like, I don't need to do this anymore. It's not part of my purpose. It doesn't serve my purpose any longer. Maybe at one point, some things you were doing served your purpose, but maybe they no longer do. Right. So, and learning to say no to things is really hard, especially if it's somebody that needs something from you. At least for me, it's hard to tell no to somebody. Right. But you need to learn to say that, it's definitely important if you want to, focus on execution and executing your growth. You can't do everything. Although sometimes I feel like I need to learn to say no as well. And because I do too much, but it's definitely something we all need to improve on, is saying no.
So true.
I love that. It's, Jess, when you ask that question, what it makes me think of is why the 90-day plan is so awesome, is because we tend to, and if you're a type A person who's really goal driven and intense with your, you're like, I commit to this, I'm doing it hell or high water type of person, then it's like, if you set up a year goal and it's not working, it takes you longer to drop it. than if you set up a 90-day plan, because within 90 days, you know whether that's going to work, and you have that space set up for evaluation to go, I need to drop this. This isn't working. The outcome's not there. The ROI is not there. I'm not enjoying it. It's not yielding the results I want. Then it's easier to say no. But if it's a year-long goal and you're only a few months in, you're thinking like, well, wait, what if I go 6 months? Maybe something will change. Whereas in 90 days, you go, you can evaluate a lot more quickly and effectively to know when to drop those projects, systems, habits that aren't working. So it's really important to ask yourself along the way, what do I need to drop? So in that what's working, what's not working question, you go, okay, what do I actually need to drop? What's not serving me? What's not bringing me joy? What's not helping my clients? What's making me feel stuck and stifled? And so, because I think often we think we need to add something, but it's actually that we need to drop something and say no, like Joe's saying, like learn what to say no to and when to drop before it's not that it's ever too late, because I think we always learn from those, but just to be able to get back on track more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Do you rely on or fall back on regularly using your own personal values to check in on that daily and weekly basis? I mean, if we're going to get really granular to your beginning questions, is there something that you rely on to help you say no, or to recognize that, yeah, I'm going to have a gazillion things that are really important tomorrow or this week, and that's okay because it's only this week? But is there a value that you use to do that? And then, of course, the same thing, that value also saying, I can filter that out and I don't have to feel guilt. I can filter that out and I don't have to feel shame. I can filter that out because that at which point in time it doesn't serve me. It's only for somebody else and not the greater good.
I completely do it by values. I instantly ask myself when people, because I get, I'm sure all of us get a lot of requests to be on committees and do on and on and on. I could just add the list of what people ask me to do. And it's really easy for me to say no now. It did not used to be, but I just go, I'm building my business to the 7-figure mark and I want to impact 5 million people. And that's not really in alignment with my path at the moment. So I can refer some people to you or send some people your way, but that's not what I want to do. That's not going to be in alignment with my highest values at the current moment. And so it's like, it shifts the direction away from being like, I'm saying no to you. I'm saying no because it's not in alignment with my mission. And then people tend to respond to it differently than if you're just, I think people struggle with how to say no. It's like you feel like, and I like that you said you feel guilty, you feel shame, you feel like you're letting someone down potentially. And there's all those ways that you start to go, maybe I should say yes. And you try to talk yourself into it. But it's really easy if you just sit back and you go, even your 90-day plan, you can go, is this in alignment with my 90-day plan? Does this advance my 90-day plan? If it doesn't, answer's no. It's very easy and it's right in front of your face. Yep. That's how I do it.
And if you want, basically, you just kind of create, I don't want to call it an excuse, but say like Amanda was saying, you have a rule, like I created, tell the person I created a rule that is, I'm not allowing myself to do A, B, or C. And this doesn't align that with, with those values right now. Right. So if you kind of label it that way, the person will see it. You're not really saying no to them. You're just, they'll understand, hey, he's focused on this rule. And the reason he's saying no is because of that rule, not because of me. Right. Yeah. So I wasn't very eloquent there, but hopefully that kind of got a point across where, if you have a reason, like a rule, blame the rule. Don't, that way the person says, they don't take it personally. So that's a little easier, kind of a trick that I've been using to make myself and, the other people feel a little bit better if I do say no.
It's always tough, especially for me. The toughest is family. Sometimes you got it, not like my immediate family here, but my next immediate family, my extended family, being able to say, I love you. And we have a whole bunch of stuff on this calendar. And so here's when you can fit in. Would you like that? And there's, by the way, that's not how I say it because it won't come across that way, but that is the ultimate piece of it. Because if we actually ran personal decisions, somebody said this on the show recently, and I wish I could credit them by name offhand, and I cannot. They said if we made our personal decisions the same way we made our business decisions, things would be a lot smoother because there is no guilt or shame. We think too much and we feel too much and we worry too much in our personal life. And by the way, when we get to be good worriers, then we're really not good at making business decisions either. So understanding that distinction and where that shame or blame or guilt or worriness comes in, it's just great to notice. We don't have to do anything about it. We may not be able to do anything about it, but if we can notice, it's the beginning of awareness. And that's really the first step of anything. Are we aware?
Mm-hmm.
Are we aware of it?
Where I learned this from was actually from Tim Ferriss. He did a podcast
Oh, yeah.
on people that rejected him for being a part of his Tools of, I think it was the Tools of Titan book, right?
Yeah.
And he just talked about some letters that he received where people use this, hey, I really appreciate you and inviting me to be in the book or whatever it was, right? But right now I've decided to take some personal time off, and I have a rule that says I'm not going to allow myself to do anything right now like that. And
Yep.
that was kind of like the context of and where I learned this from, where again the person was stating a rule and they didn't want to offend Tim Ferriss. They liked him, but they have this rule now that they're following, and it's out. This project is outside of those rules.
Okay, we're going to switch gears just a little bit because both of you are actively involved and engaged in your growth strategy. And I'm very curious to know what makes it bold to really be actively engaged on a regular basis with your growth strategy.
What makes it bold?
Makes it bold.
Makes it bold. Well, I think for me, this is getting maybe to my specific growth strategy right now, and being bold is I'm trying to be all over the place, right? So like really involved with my customer base. So I'm doubling down on getting extremely personal with my clients or my customers. And so I'm doing that through weekly live streams on YouTube. Every Friday, I do live Zoom meetings. It's kind of like an open office for like 3 or 4 hours. Any of my customers could come on and have a live conversation with me and other people that are in the room. I get people from all over the world coming in at the same time. It's really amazing. Another thing is any customer that's purchased from me over the past 4 months has gotten a personal video from me saying thank you, anywhere from like 30 seconds to a minute, depending on what they purchased and whatnot. But I just been doubling down on very personal, very high touch way of running my business, and I've seen huge benefits from that in the last couple months.
That's awesome. It's so interesting. My brain is going to like, I love this question and what makes it bold. It's making me think of vibrancy or alive, a feeling of aliveness. And what makes it bold is this constant inner drive to, like Joe's saying, impact more people and really just expand your presence and expand your reach. And for me, that strategic action comes from a place of I love being actively engaged with the people that I'm working with and the audiences I'm reaching. And that boldness comes in when it's like, okay, instead of doing it for me, I'm going to shine the spotlight on you. What do you need? What can I bring to the table for you today? And so all of my new product development or, it's like online courses and workshops and Instagram and IGTV and podcasts and all of the stuff that I do, I'm like, oh, I want to be the most fully self-expressed person I can be, because it allows other people to do the same. And then that way that boldness really helps me stay actively engaged with other people. That's what came to my mind.
All right. Usually that's the end of the show, but I'm not ready to end it yet. You guys, I want to keep. So we're going to do one more piece here.
Okay.
And I want to know from your past experience, what has been an effective growth strategy for you in your work style? And if you could put a couple of words around what your work style is and why it worked, I'm completely intrigued about that.
Strategy for work style. Do you mean
what your growth strategy? So how are you choosing your growth strategy, and then how does your work style support it and strengthen it, right?
For me, I think it's been trial and error. It's been trial and error, falling down and getting up and going, oh, that doesn't work. And My most recent, the 90-day planning is very recent for me. And it's been out of that place of realizing that entrepreneurship is very different than the world I was in before. Academia is completely predictable. Your 6-year plan or your 7-year plan, day one that you get in, like, I've got to take these courses and I've got to teach these courses and I've got to write this stuff and do this. And it's very consistent. So for me, in picking choosing a growth strategy, it really has to do with constant adaptation and willingness to refine based on the feedback I'm getting from both my outer world, because that's a reflection of my inner world. Do I feel joy? Am I enjoying this process? Is it having the results I want? And are my customers and clients responding in a way that's giving me feedback that what I'm doing is working? So it's really been this growth strategy of radical adaptation and responsibility combined. So it's going, okay, I've got to adapt, and I've also got to constantly be doing that self-reflective awareness and then being responsible for my outcomes, which means I might have to implement a whole new strategy because that one didn't work. I'm throwing it out the window. Or, oh, that worked really well for that person, but it's not working for me. So now I've got to shift.
For me, I think it's first, it starts with constant learning and a passion for improvement, right? So you can't be content with where you are. You're not going to grow. You have to be constantly rolling with the punches and constantly learning new things, improving yourself, challenging yourself. And then at that, another thing I think that is really important is take all those things that you have and that you've been learning, and then evaluate like what the gut feeling is. Like, basically, instead of like copying somebody else, you can definitely test things that other people are doing, but ultimately look at yourself and what do you feel on the inside is right, and do that, right? Because if you do that, it brings out who you are, right? And it makes what you're doing extremely authentic, and people see that, right? So like if you're trying to do something that isn't who you are, that comes through, right? No matter how good you are, people are going to notice that what you're doing isn't real, and that's not going to bring dividends, right? But if you follow what your gut is, what you think is right, then that's going to come out in terms of your passion. People are going to see that, and it's really going to come off as authentic. And I think that is the number one thing that anybody can do is, you could test things that other people are doing, but really focus on who you are, what feels right to you, and what your feeling is. And that's where your growth is going to come.
You heard it here. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, program 230. You'll find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P230. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 230. Also search the site for Execute Your Growth Strategy. All right, you've already listened to this far. Stay a little longer, give us a rating. Whatever platform you're listening, iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, you name it, rate us. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. Also, use hashtag VBB Radio to stay engaged, because it's our practical experience that we're sharing here with your practical experience listening there that define what it means to be an effective leader today. That said, please also use the hashtag. Please also visit the website, connect with Amanda and Joe directly as well. They are not only here, but they're very accessible people in the roles that they are playing. And we want to know, how do you execute your growth strategy?
The Voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. Use hashtag VBBRadio or email us at radio@reddirection.com to ask questions and share your experiences. Add your voice to the conversation. Together, we define what being an effective leader means today. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome.